Welcome to What Works, where nonprofit leaders share real stories about what makes impact possible and their organizations thrive. I'm your host, Marla Moody, a transformational leadership coach with over 30 years in the nonprofit sector. And today we're going to dive into saying the hard things, feedback, fear, how leaders can help others define their roles that would help them truly flourish. My guest, Michael Collins, is a nonprofit developer director in Chicago with extensive experience in fundraising, communications, and leadership. We'll have a candid conversation about what happens when we avoid feedback. And is it possible for leaders to really lean into honest and thoughtful conversations? So get ready. Michael is here to show us what works. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. So, I really enjoyed our time together the other day, and it just made me realize how, as leaders, we never stop growing and becoming better. But what hit me is that idea of how do you lean in to conversations. Before we get there, though, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, even how you got to Chicago,
Sure.
that type of thing.
Sure. Michael Collins, originally from Green Bay, Wisconsin. Try not to say that too loudly when I'm in Chicago, which is home now. But I've worked in a variety of nonprofits over really the last 2 decades. I sort of fell into it, as a lot of us do. Somewhere along the line, I realized I'd been doing fundraising event planning most of my life. So I just sort of decided to lean into making it a career. And knock on wood, it's worked out. But Chicago was sort of always the destination in the Midwest. If you're leaving, that's somewhere you go. So even before I decided to come here, I knew I had friends, family, former colleagues in the area. So it worked out well. The winter's still a little rough, but other than that, I love Chicago.
That's wonderful. You mentioned kind of stumbled into it like a
Yeah.
lot of us do.
Oh, yeah.
W- What was that early moment when you go, yeah, this is my lane?
I think the first full-time fundraising job I had where I was given sort of a general idea of what we were supposed to do and a random number that we were supposed to get to somehow in terms of fundraising. And I realized I understood sort of how to build the plan to make that happen. And I wasn't afraid to either pick up the phone and call strangers
Hmm,
to see if they'd be willing to do something or just go out and meet people. There's a certain amount of either, I will say, fearlessness bordering on sort of arrogance sometimes. We're like, of course people want to talk to me, right?
right.
Um, that sort of made sense for me. I come from a big, pretty loud family, so you sort of have to stake your place early. So yeah, it just made sense to me.
Yeah. I love it because you kind of follow in your gut and
Yeah.
being able to pick up the phone and do that kind of things is so important.
Yes.
One thing that really stuck out to me when we talked last is when your organization kind of restructured, someone was put on your team that kinda almost was a silent failure problem, right? There was
Hmm.
some challenges that weren't being addressed. If you feel comfortable, I'd love
Sure.
to hear that story because I think it's something we all need to hear.
Yeah. When I got into this role, new department, so we were sort of pieced together and hadn't really worked together before. But what I realized very quickly was that one of my employees was struggling with pieces of the job
Yeah.
and hadn't been getting feedback necessarily on how to do things better. It was one of those cases where they were so loved personally
Mm,
that people were kind of just like, oh, I'll fix this myself. But when I was able to actually sit down and have, conversations, say, this isn't exactly what we're looking for. Can you do X, Y, and Z? And they would. I realized the problem was in trying to be kind and sort of avoid conflict of any sort. They were doing this person a disservice because
yes.
then they were just looking at the work that wasn't what they wanted, but they weren't given a chance to fix it. And without that, there's not really a chance to grow and get it right. It wasn't that they couldn't do it or didn't really know how. They thought they were doing the work. And without any sort of feedback saying, hey, this isn't right, I don't blame them. They were doing all of this stuff and never hearing back that someone had to fix something or something needed to be done. So once that started happening, you could see the improvement happening. It's not
Mm,
you're making the same mistakes over and over. We all make mistakes. So, like, we're all going to learn new ways to screw things up. But there was absolutely learning around, like, kind of understanding what was needed when someone asked for this report or that report. It was nice to see that it wasn't necessarily a performance issue. A lot of it was a communication issue. And so once we got there, it was easier because we could have conversations now that, like, this isn't working, but you're doing great at this.
Mm.
Or being willing to come to me and say, hey, is this right? Before just sending it, because I knew I would give feedback and give direction if that was needed. So it improved things greatly.
It sounds like in the process of helping this person improve, there was trust that was built. That
Absolutely. Yeah, I think knowing that someone can be honest with you, but kind at the same time, like, feedback doesn't have to be like, it's not a personal failure that we're talking
yes.
about here. This is work. So it's not, I don't like you. It's, we need to get better at doing X, Y, and Z. The more you can have those open conversations around that, I think it's easier. And I think it also stings less
Mm.
when you're getting feedback that things aren't great. Because it's really just about the work and trying to get it to the best place possible.
So, initiating those conversations can be a challenge. How did you start addressing that without kind of putting the shame?
I think if you start from a place of everyone wants to do well, and people in nonprofits largely, aren't really here for the money. They're here because they want to do good. They want to sort of make a difference. And if you come into that people are kind of coming from that perspective, I think it's a lot easier because they're not doing things wrong on purpose. Most people would like to succeed in their job.
Yeah.
So if you're willing to have a conversation to help them do that, I think it's easier. But also, I will say that one of the things I was very intentional about doing as well was pointing out when things were going well, saying, I really liked this, or this piece that you did was great. So all of the feedback coming from me wasn't sort of critical. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like a meeting with me popped up on the calendar and it's like, oh no, I don't want to do this today. Like, there was a sense that we would also talk about the good as
Mm.
well as the things that needed to be improved.
Yeah. And when you're coming with the approach of you're for them and
Hmm.
coming with the approach that I know you want to do well, like we all want to, right?
Correct.
None of us, it feels lousy to not do a good job.
Correct.
I've seen it way too often, and that's why I really wanted to start with this point is so often the first time we hear something bad is when they're kicking us out the door. And we do it to be kind, and that's probably the most unkind
Correct.
thing you can do.
Yeah. If you're blindsiding someone with, like, a problem at a point in which it's not fixable anymore, you haven't been kind. You've just been avoiding it. It's about the worst case scenario for them. And frankly, it's pretty much the worst case scenario for you as well, because now you have to find a new employee. Rather than working with someone who's in the job who can potentially do it, you're starting from scratch.
Yeah.
And having hired a bunch of times in this career, that can be a painful process.
Yeah. And it's an expensive process,
It is.
because that knowledge is being lost as well.
Yes.
So, and you might have already said it, but like the feedback that really does land, what are 2 to 3 specific phrases or approaches that have really helped people hear the hard things and stay engaged rather than kind of get defensive?
I think being specific and being in the moment sort of as it's happening are really helpful, because if you're waiting a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is to discuss something, it's not going to be fresh in their mind. And it's sort of going to feel like you're just sort of pulling things out and, like, keeping score. Like,
Mhm.
you're building a list of things rather than having a discussion about what you need to do. And kind of as I mentioned before, it can be easy, especially with folks, I think, in their early career, to take feedback as personal. So talking
Yes.
about the specifics of the work, of, like, here's what you did. What I'm looking for is this. Then being willing in some cases to talk through how I would approach the problem. Like, if I'm trying to pull this report or whatever it is together, I would probably start like this. Does that work for you? Walking through this process and sometimes just finding out why they went the path they did, it can sound absolutely reasonable. So talking through kind of how you envision these things and how you solve them, I think can be really helpful to folks, especially earlier in their career. Because I know there are times now, whatever it is, grant proposals or like meeting prep that is so built into like what I do by now that I don't really think about it. But putting together uh major gift ask meeting and how you do that isn't really second nature. So
Mm.
like a lot of the stuff we do is kind of funky. So being willing to sort of talk through that stuff, I think is really helpful.
So, how often do you suggest meeting with the people that report to you?
We do at least like a specific one-on-one meeting every week, but just knowing the sort of collaborative nature of our work, it's pretty unusual, even though we're all remote, like not in the same place, to at least not send some Slack messages or emails back and forth pretty much every day. But at the very least, I hold like 1 hour for them that week, and I ask them to put together an agenda of what they want to talk about. I'll have my things as well, but I like having them sort of bring forth kind of what they're working on, questions they have. How are things going? There are moments when it's just like, how are you? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? There needs to be a level of like conversation to it as well. But at the absolute bare minimum, I feel like with direct reports, you should have some weekly time that's set aside just for them. And I do everything in my power to like hold those times.
I love that. I'm gonna tell you a little secret.
Yeah.
When I even it was the last role, I started with 4 people that were not aligned to what we were doing. I didn't want to meet with them, and
Oh,
I met with them once a month.
mm,
And what happened is they didn't feel empowered. They
yeah.
felt like I was high control, disengaged, and
Yeah.
so I switched to a once a week,
Yeah.
and the level of empowerment that they felt,
Yeah.
because if they were stuck, we could unstick it
Right.
immediately. I just wanna underline that because we as bosses, sometimes we feel like we don't have time for the very people that we're put in charge of
Yeah.
to develop. It transformed the team, it transformed my leadership. What I noticed is, like, I had time to see the cracks and fix them and come up with
Yeah.
ideas. I just became so much more creative, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's important.
You had mentioned about developing a career plan for your
Mm.
employees or for those that are with your team. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. One of the things I try to do with my staff as we're setting out like goals for the year is talk about at that point sort of any thoughts they have about what they want to do. Maybe it's like next year, maybe it's further down the road, but like talking about what it is they like to do and where they think they would like to go. So then we can plan in, let's do some trainings around these things. Or if you're interested in this, why don't I invite you to the meetings about this project? So getting them in the room and in the conversation is really helpful. Lucky or, cursed, who knows, but I've always been sort of a broad range development person. I've never really been in a role where it's specific. I wasn't a major gift officer alone. Major gifts were part of a bunch of roles I've had. So I didn't realize how fortunate I was in that until my career started progressing. I realized more opportunities were available for me because I knew such a broad area.
Mhm.
In some cases as well, though, it'll surface things that are job adjacent, or they would like to take it, say, rather than being just fully development, they really like the comm side of things. So finding ways to loop them into those communication pieces that I have to do, just having them in the room as I'm talking to some folks, it's a good opportunity. But being very specific in helping to find them like trainings during the year that kind of align with the things they want to learn, the things they want to do. I've also been lucky now, knock on wood, I think it just got approved, but my staff have been given the opportunity to go to conferences this year. So meeting outside people, doing similar work, it's important that you build up that sort of network beyond just your organization. It's great to have all sorts of connections internally, but you need to broaden it beyond that. Like, very few people stay at the same org for their whole life. So kind of making those connections and having people outside that you can go to for questions, ideas, grab coffee and just like talk about the things that are challenges for you and hear what's happening at other orgs. It's how you really sort of grow.
What I hear is a very open-handed view of curiosity, of try different things, get them in the
Yeah.
room, allow them to go to conferences, which is just a perk that sometimes only the people on top get. And I'm like, I think we're really missing out because you're not only developing them as people, but you're developing the depth
Yeah.
of the organization. So
Yeah.
that feels significant. You had also mentioned that, like a lot of us, what we do and we do it well, and we don't like to hand things to other people.
Yes.
Leaders really have trouble with this.
Yes.
Um, it's like, especially the things we really like, or we just don't
Mhm.
think they're going to do it as well. Could you talk around that? Because that was one of the development pieces I heard you talk about as well with your team.
I've always tried to find ways for my staff to do new things. In particular, one of the things that I was kind of tasked with as part of the big picture of things, we do a few marathons and things like that where you have a fundraising team. And it's like, I know how to do these. Like this is a thing. I've done it before. You can sort of roll it out. But my team didn't. They saw me work on some of the stuff initially. Then one of my team members really wanted to do more of that. Like at some point wanted to get more involved maybe in like events and event planning. Like, okay, so this time you take the creation of those pages. You set that up and then let's talk about the sort of communications that go out every week. After we did that a few times, I'm like, send it to me to look at and then it's on you. You're creating these pieces, you're sending them out, you are the one answering questions. It now frees up time for me to do other things or help in other areas that maybe they don't have the background for yet. That's kind of what it is, where it's like if you aren't willing to hand those things off, they're never going to learn and you're never going to view them as trustworthy because you've never given them the opportunity to do it. I do that with my boss too. We had a conversation this week where, as she was talking about all these things that she had going on, I'm like, so and so can do this, right? She's like, well, it's last minute. I'm like, okay, but it's also last minute for you. And you have 3 other things that you also have to do. So why don't we hand this thing over? And so seeing that happen and it work out well, one of my staff members got big shout outs from everyone because they put together some historic giving data for, a major gift person that we have. The person was originally like low 6-figure gift. Annually, that's what they did. But after looking at this, they realized that there was a gap between where they thought they were in terms of supporting the org and where they actually were. So because of that, it went to $500,000 a year. So 5 times the size. So able to tell that staff member, look at what you helped do, and then get others as well to realize that this piece came from this person. So kudos to them, not like our whole team, like shout us out if you want, but you can also shout them out directly because they were able to do this thing.
That there are so many different lessons from that. One is obviously developing people. Leaders, and I'm putting myself in this category, right? We don't want to give work because we feel bad. It's
Correct.
like it's last minute or they're busy, let alone that we're 3 times as busy, right? But there and there's a kindness to that and
Hmm.
also an a lack of wisdom in that. And you know what? There's going to be times when they don't do it as well.
Hmm.
But there's going to be times like you said is like they're going to knock it out of the park
Right.
and what was the quote? If they can do it at least 80% of what I can do, give it to them. And
Yep.
but it's like their 100% is better than my 5%.
Correct. Absolutely.
So I think as leaders, prying our hands off of that and then also helping maybe some very competent or some workers that maybe have a little bit of perfectionism,
Yep.
or territorialism. Like I see in both ways.
Me
Someone
too.
can be territorial or someone can just be a perfectionist. What are
Yes.
your thoughts on what you've seen with that?
I've encountered both, and pretty much everywhere I've been. They both get you in the same trouble. It's this need to hold on and sort of thinking that your value is derived from these pieces, that it's all yours. If someone takes something away, what's next? As opposed to sort of thinking about the capacity it builds up. The perfectionism thing is a real challenge sometimes. Within my team, we do a lot of stuff that's like going to external donors. At first, when I started, I think for some of the big pieces, there were like 4 hurdles we had to jump of like, these people need to sign off. One of them, God bless him, is I think incapable of viewing something as done.
Mm.
There's always going to be a better version of it. So what if we try tweaking these things more? What we ran into is delays. There were things that were originally supposed to go out last fall that ended up going out in December and January
Oh.
because things just got so backed up. So part of it has also been, I think, building up belief in us. They've seen enough stuff now where the barrier is less. There are still times where I will sometimes jokingly say, I think it's there. I think this needs to be there. We can learn some things from this for the next time we do it, but we got to get this out the door. They've been willing to acknowledge that now, which I appreciate. We're at least in a place where if I say that, they know it's because I think what we have is good, even if it's not perfect. Sometimes just communicating and sharing stuff out is more important than getting it from 95% there to 100% there.
That reminds me of the done is better than perfect.
Correct. It is.
As you think through building a team, how do you find talent?
It's tough sometimes, but one of the things that I will say is that if you have employees and colleagues that like working with you, it's a heck of a lot easier to get referrals out of them for the people that they actually like. Um, that's the
That's
other that's the other nice part of building a good team that likes each other is they're willing to bring the people they value and know into that circle as opposed to being like, stay the heck away from here. So I think there's a certain amount of like tapping into the networks of people we have here to kind of get some of that. The other thing, depending on the size of the org, one of the things that I've kind of tried to do, especially for early career opportunities, is let the program side of the house know that things are open too. Because sometimes there are folks that really like the work, but realize at some point maybe they're not the direct service type. Like maybe that's not their world. So letting everyone know kind of what development does and sort of what opportunities might exist is a good way to get people who are very mission driven that you think you can teach those skills to. Because
mm.
a lot of what we do is things you have to learn, but not necessarily such a specialized or unique skill that you can't teach it to people. I think there's some value in that as well. And I've had it work out well a few times where someone in the program world is like, this might not be it for me. So they transition over. Oh, they've got the buy-in on the mission, and you just have to help them figure out how to support that mission in a different way now.
I know you mentioned that your boss is very good at keeping work hours and turning off the computer at 5, which is
Yep.
4 for you. When you think through burnout, boundaries, and sustainable leadership, what have you seen as best practices that have really helped you sustain?
Yeah. I mean, early in my career, I was absolutely one of those like near burnout folk because in my mind, I had to do this.
Hmm.
Like it was just like all on me to do all of this stuff. When I was able to sort of think of more as like a collaborative venture and like could work with teammates and all of that stuff, it became easier. But as I have progressed in my career, I've been much more direct about keeping my sort of hours and like even I know I do more, but we closed the office for 2 weeks around Christmas and New Year's. I told my staff, you absolutely do not log in and check to see what the year-end gifts are. I will do that. And I will check in the morning in case, something came in the last day that we have to get paperwork out to because it always happens at the end of December. But this isn't a thing you have to engage with. Step away, take your 2 weeks, come back ready to go. I think saying it and modeling it has
Hmm.
also been really helpful for staff. Because it's one thing if you say work-life balance is important, but you're still working like 80 hours a week, no one believes you. They
Right.
think because you sent an email on like Saturday night that they have to respond to it at that time. So I, as much as possible, explicitly say kind of those expectations around you are not on call 24/7. It can wait till tomorrow. Like
Mhm.
what we're doing right now, it is important, it is valuable, but so is your free time. Take your time with your friends, family, go walk the dog to the park, like whatever, but just set some boundaries. And I think doing it myself has made it easier for my staff to do it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, setting that model and putting those expectations. Burnout's a real thing,
Mhm.
and I like the idea of modeling it. How have you seen being that, first of all, purposefully with yourself and setting those boundaries? What values, what have you seen? What have some of the benefits been?
I think giving myself that time away has allowed me to sort of better recharge. I also have found that stepping away from a problem or a project, even if it's just overnight, revisiting it the next day, I can look at it with a fresh set of eyes rather than sit here and bang my head against the wall till 8 p.m. to try and get this thing perfect. I can hop back on at 8 in the morning, look at it, and kind of figure it out that way. I'm able to do that, I think, in a way that I wasn't when I was trying to go practically 24/7 at times. It's not feasible long term. The other thing I will say is friends and family complain less about my job. I'm a nicer person when I'm not stressed like that. I
Yeah.
can be myself, I can be happy, and I can talk about something other than work as well.
Yeah.
Um, that was one of the surprising things. I remember being in a job and it was one that was overwhelming, did not set good boundaries. And it got to the place where my friends were asking me to quit. And I was like, okay, so what you're telling me is I'm not just miserable. I'm making you miserable. Okay, message received. Like, you know
Mhm.
what? No, no job is worth destroying all of my friend and family relationships over. It's just not.
Mhm. Somehow I think we think that productivity is this prize
Yes.
to win at all cost.
Yes.
And what we lose is our humanity almost.
Correct. Yeah.
Mm. As you think through this coming year, what is something that you want to be purposeful about, to change, something you want to add, take away to be better at what you're doing?
One of the things that I'm starting to do and having conversations with other about is figuring out what's not working and removing stuff. I
Mm.
think we've been very good at thinking about new ways to engage donors or like a new event. The question isn't always asked of, okay, what could we take away? Because we're not adding more time in the day. We're not adding more months to the year. If you want to do this big new initiative, what can we set aside?
Yes.
Because you can't just add forever. There is a point at which it's just not possible anymore. If we're doing any fundraising thing just because we've sort of always done it, don't be afraid to ask, does this still work for us? Is it worth it? If the answer is no, don't do it. I think that can feel scary sometimes, especially when there's dollars attached to this thing. But if the return on investment isn't great, that 50,000 wasn't worth it. You know what I mean? Could you have one meeting with a big donor and get a six-figure gift in significantly less time than it took you to make that at an event?
Yeah, the idea of reduce, and we don't, right? When we do a
Correct.
strategic plan, we just think of the things we should do, and then the things that were important, we just put down in the whirlwind. My boss was great at stacking. It's like we have too many
Mhm.
things, and he would just combine them. Like we would never take it away. It would just be added where it'd just be under one label, but you have, and I'm like, that's
That's
still
not
doing
working.
it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that doesn't count.
No. Yeah, the word I'm thinking of is margin. You've mentioned it in helping with burnout, setting
Mhm.
things, and also about what are the most important things. And maybe it's not a stop forever, but that evaluation.
Yeah, it's important.
If you were going to give advice to a younger, maybe a new leader, what would you feel you would want to tell them?
I would say the biggest favor I ever did myself in working in this nonprofit world was not taking a job where I was not passionate about the work being done. Because there are going to be days at work that suck. There's going to be a day that is rough.
Mm.
And if you can't look at what you're doing and feel like it still matters and maybe it's worth that bad day, you're not going to last. You just have to be passionate about it. That being said, I also wish someone had told the younger me that it was okay to set my boundaries a little more firmly, that just because someone asks you to do something doesn't mean the answer always has to be yes. It's okay to say no. You don't have to, on your own, figure out how to get everything done. It's not going to work.
And if you look at even the seasons, right?
Yep.
There's a season where there's high productivity, and there's
Correct.
a season of being dormant. And if it was always producing all the time, that plant, that tree, that they would die, it would die.
Yes. Yeah.
S- But
Yeah.
boy, that word no is tough.
I
So
know.
go ahead.
Once upon a time, I remember still pretty early in my career where I was doing a fundraising program, kind of specialized one that at one point when I started happened about half the year, where like we did these big events for companies. It brought in a lot of money and it was incredibly popular. And slowly over the course of my first year there, it spread out into happening all 12 months. It wasn't sustainable. Like I could do it for 3 to 6 months where I am working like crazy, but the trade-off was the other half of the year we got to sort of reevaluate, think about what worked, what didn't work, and so forth. There is a limit to how long you can be on overdrive before it just breaks down. That was a good one for me to figure out then.
Well, this is a good place to end. So much wisdom, Michael. So much
Thank
wisdom.
you.
The combination of learning the humility of saying, I know more now than I did before, and treating people with humanity and with
Yeah,
honor and yet not keeping it silent, right?
correct.
Having those hard conversations,
Yep.
being consistent with it. I know that people love to work with you.
Knock on wood.
So thank you for your time. This
Yeah,
has
absolutely.
been just a pleasure.
I enjoyed it too.